You're listening to Dr. Emma and Me on the Tudors Dynasty and Beyond podcast. And now, here are your hosts.
Hello, and welcome back to the second episode of Dr. Emma and Me. I'm Rebecca Larson, and this is Dr. Emma. Hey, Emma.
Hi, Rebecca. How are you?
Well, I'm great now that we get to do another episode together.
Yes, it seems like people liked it.
Yeah, the feedback has been phenomenal. I think I'm a little bit surprised about how much people are enjoying this idea of the Parallel Lives series.
Surprised? It was my idea. So how can you be surprised about the success?
Silly
Am I
me.
being too generous here? Maybe.
Yeah. Well, one of the cool things was, all this feedback that we got. I found out that Jill N also loves Henry Cavill, so you're not alone.
See, I'm telling you, we're an army out there. And one day, Henry Cavill will listen to this and will call us and be like, when are we going to start the show that you want me to star in? And he doesn't even need to change his name.
You really think Henry Cavill's going to call us?
Henry, please call us.
Please give us a call.
Yeah, give us a call. I'm waiting.
I do follow his fan page on Instagram too, so I get to see videos of him all the time. I'm like, Henry.
Oh,
Henry.
Okay. So Rebecca is a little obsessed with Henry Cavill too. She's been hiding it from me.
I'm a closet Henry Cavill fan. Or not.
This is all her strategy to get closer to Henry Cavill, just enticing me to talk about him.
Right. And then I got to play it cool, right? You're going to be like the fanatic, right? The
and then it's
crazy
like,
fan.
I'm the founder of the podcast. Move away.
Step aside. I'm going to England and I'm going to meet Henry Cavill in person. We're going to do an interview together.
There you go. Okay, I'll stay here in Minnesota, making sure everything's fine.
That's good. I need somebody to stay behind while I'm having all the fun.
Great.
But the first episode of Parallel Lives went really well. Do you want to recap it?
Yes, I don't even remember. What did we talk about? No,
I was hoping you'd remember.
No, of course, we talked about Isabel the First of Castile, the Queen of Queens, the marketing matriarch, and her youngest daughter, who was so much like her, Catherine of Aragon, obviously so linked to the Tudors dynasty, mother of the first woman to sit on the throne of England, Mary the First of England, so first wife of the Tool, Henry VIII. Slaying left and right. We talked about 1513 and her important role as regent, but we talked about so many things and so many things that are similar to her mother, so many things that were different. Very different. I want to insist on that idea that it's very different to be a ruling queen than a queen consort.
Yes, definitely a big difference between the two. And we made it very clear during that episode that we wanted feedback from listeners on some ideas of two women that we should look at and see what
feedback, please. Nice feedback. Okay, guys.
No, the feedback was really good. So I kind of want to go over some of what the listeners had sent in, comments that they left all over social media and on YouTube. And the first comment that I saw was from Jeremiah H., who's actually a patron on Patreon. We all know Jeremiah, right?
Yeah.
And he said he wants a big episode on Juana of Castile, even though he knows we've already done one.
Who is that?
Juana who? I knew you would like that one.
Juana? Oh.
Juana?
It seems like you don't have anything blocking your throat. That's impeding you to say Juana. This is so difficult. I know.
And it's been forever since I've tried to say your full name on the episode too, that I don't even know that I could say it anymore.
Welcome to every teacher I ever had in Spain. Or England, for that sake. Or anyone.
Or anyone. Yeah.
That's why we just keep it to Dr. Emma, right?
Yeah, it's easier for everyone, especially Rebecca.
Yeah. It's all because of Rebecca, guys.
Makes me sound so bad. Like I can't learn.
Juana, it's a very difficult, but Juana and Juan are probably one of the most used names in Spanish royalty. So obviously, and that's the way we pronounce it. We have them, that J actually comes from our Islamic roots and Arab roots from So yeah, it's an important letter in the Spanish alphabet. It's funny because we say Juana with it, and we use a J. So in English, Joanna. I'm sure we've heard of her, Joanna. But originally, and her name was written with an I, like her, yeah, an I. So Joanna, more like in the earlier format of it. So when you see eyes around in Castile, those represent Queen Juana the First of Castile, the third daughter of Isabel of Castile and Fernando of Aragon. So sister of Catherine of Aragon, older sister to Catherine of Aragon.
Yeah. I think that's interesting because one of the things that makes me think of is like the printing press and how the J's were printed as I's anyway. So I find that interesting, that parallel.
Well, yes, the parallels, yes, and like there's more connections in that time between nations and things because also a lot of people are using Latin. So all these names get translated to their Latin forms. Elisabetta for Elizabeth. So Elizabeth the First of England and Ireland shares a name with Isabel the First of Castile. And when they write it in Latin, it's Elisabetta for both of them, right?
Yeah.
And we change it. And that's why in the 19th century, Isabel of Castile was called by some historians Isabella, which is the Italian form. Now we're trying to like kind of reverse that. But you will see a lot of labels for Isabel the First of Castile as Isabella of Castile, which is not wrong, but it's just we're trying to move from that Italian denomination because she was obviously the first queen of Spain. And her daughter was arguably the second queen of Spain because she succeeded Isabel when Isabel died in 1504.
Okay, before we get too sidetracked, because this is what we tend to do, isn't it?
Yeah. It's parallel lives, not single life of Juana the First of Castile.
Singular lives.
Singular lives. So we could do we're already, this is brainstorming, not just podcasting.
That's right. It really is. Okay, so back to listener feedback.
Okay.
We got another suggestion from Lori D. Now, she suggests that we look at parallel lives between Margaret Tudor, the sister of Henry VIII, and her daughter, Margaret Douglas.
Oh, I love a nice Scottish there. Yes.
Yeah. There's
Margaret,
a lot of
I know. I would. I don't know as much as about Margaret Douglas I would like to, but that's the great thing about parallel lives. Now I need to learn about her more. Yeah. I do know quite a bit about Margaret Tudor and her relationship to Catherine of Aragon. Also because there's a very good book by Michelle Beer comparing their their queenships. That Catherine of Aragon and Margaret Tudor, because at one point there were the two queens in the British Isles, right?
Yeah.
And Margaret has a big role after that battle that we talked about, because she becomes regent and it's messy.
Yes. Well, and Margaret Douglas's life was full of drama, and that's one I feel pretty confident talking about. So I think between the two of us, we probably could do an episode on that. So we'll see what happens there.
Let me research a little bit, guys. Lori, let me research a little bit, but I think that's a great idea. I love it.
We have more suggestions too. Douglas B., who follows us on social media, Douglas always comments, and I appreciate him so much. He wants us to compare the lives of Lady Jane Grey and Mary the First. And I found that really interesting because I was like, parallel lives between those two. I feel like I need to do some extra research on that one.
Yeah, especially because one ended because of the other, right? So, and then Mary said sorry. Actually, I think a lot of people may not know about this, that Mary was very, very reticent to sign off that that sentence. But she thought she had no other choice and she had to do it. And the reality is that Lady Jane Grey had signed documents as queen. And that was considered high treason because when Mary declares herself Queen of England, she dates her queenship starting the day Edward died. So, I mean, it's very complex. It's very similar in many ways and respects, I think, to what Mary Queen of Scots and Elizabeth the kind of a deal there,
Yeah, yeah.
It's women have a very hard time to stay in power, to seize power. Now we see it differently because probably because Elizabeth had that long reign, Elizabeth the First.
Yeah.
But back in the day, imagine Mary the First after all she'd been through to get to the crown, and then Lady Jane Grey is gonna come and take away her right. Not the granddaughter of Isabella the First of Castile. I don't think.
No
Sorry,
way.
Lady Jane Grey. I feel for her.
Yeah.
I feel for that woman. How can you not? I feel for Mary having to sign that death sentence. It was all the men's fault.
Yeah. Yeah. It would have been
No, no.
tough.
And jokes aside, it is a very interesting, very interesting, yes.
Yeah.
And we can see how, from the beginning of their lives, Mary is destined to rule, really, or at least to rule in the absence of a male heir. And Lady Jane Grey is just put there at the point where, a certain group of people wants to keep in power, right?
Yeah.
Well, you know a lot about that, so.
Yes, yes. Okay, so the last one, the last listener suggested topic for parallel lives. Kimberly suggests that we look at
Kimberly.
your favorite. Yes, we know Kimberly too. She's also a patron over on Patreon and follows us and always has great feedback. She wants us to look at Isabel of Castile and Elizabeth of York.
Oh, yes, that's beautiful too. And I thought, and actually this was part of my research for my dissertation, for my PhD dissertation. Because there's so many, because the reason why I chose these already to study these parallel lives is because when I was studying at Catherine of Aragon's queenship, because there was such an absence of sources, I decided to go back to her predecessors, and obviously her mother's education in Castile was, and you have to do that, a no-brainer. But also Elizabeth of York, because she knows her by correspondence since she's born. And she also takes care of her in the distance while she's growing up. She does a lot of things for Catherine of Aragon, and Catherine of Aragon models her queenship a lot after her, and that's not been highlighted enough. So Kimberly pays good attention to what we do. Obviously.
Yeah, she always does.
I think that's a great one. And Elizabeth of York, maybe could have ruled, and maybe should have ruled.
Ooh, I think we're going to have some fun with that one. Well, now we got a list going. So if you're listening right now and you just thought of parallel lives.
Episode 2.
People are really sitting there going, can we get to episode 2 already? Why are you still talking about this? So let's move on because
at least we know one of the people.
Yeah, I was just
a bit about her already.
I was just going to say, Jeremiah is going to be very excited to find out. It's not a big episode on Juana, but today, who are we talking about?
So we are talking about Juana, aren't we? We are talking about Juana the First of Castile, dubbed Joanna the Mad.
Yeah.
Like I said, third daughter of Isabel the First of Castile, Fernando the Second of Aragon, the first king and queen of Spain, founders of the Spanish monarchy. And really, she isn't born to rule, but ends up ruling because when you're a royal child, you're always born to rule because it can happen. And she does succeed her mother in 1504. On the other hand, I thought it would be a great idea to compare her life to someone who, because we did a ruling queen in the first one that was so successful, I thought in this time maybe more of an anti-hero, like Juana is. But then again, I wanted to convey that message that it's very different to be a ruling queen and a queen consort, but maybe not so much because when you're a woman in the 16th century, your luck is, even if you're in the elite, is very, very scarce, and your fate can be horrible. I thought we could compare it to Queen Anne Boleyn.
Ooh, everybody's favorite.
Everybody's favorite. Not my favorite. Everybody knows that. But I've learned so much about Anne Boleyn in the recent years. I'm doing an exhibition with her medal in the British Museum coming in a month. It's going to be opening. And I've learned to, it's like when I first came to the figure of Juana and I was like, yeah, she does sound like she's mad. And then you deep dive, and it's more complex than that. And I think Anne Boleyn's story is more complex than she was a homewrecker. Like, she's been known for centuries, right?
Yeah.
So a very young woman under a lot of pressure by the tool, which is not good. Henry
No.
VIII was, he ruined the lives of many people around him. So I've learned that she's grown on me, to be honest.
Yeah, she has made her mark on history. People
Yes.
have kept her alive throughout history because her story was so tragic.
Yes.
I can only say that if Anne Boleyn had not been executed, we probably wouldn't be talking about her so much today.
Exactly. And maybe in that sense, that's why I wanted to compare it to Juana, because Juana has been one of the most famous Spanish queens of all time because of her tragic story, not precisely for being a good queen, right? For being the crazy queen, right?
Yeah, yeah.
She was imprisoned by her father, well, her husband and father, and was imprisoned for decades.
Yeah.
So these men sometimes just ruin these women's lives, and I think these are two good examples. They do have more parallels than it appears so on the first, when you first approach these two figures. They do have things that are very similar, and I think that contributed to their downfalls too.
Yeah, I think so too. And before anybody makes a complaint toward me about saying we only talk about Anne Boleyn because she was executed and then makes a comparison with Catherine Howard being executed and how we don't talk as much about her, I think it's also, in addition to being executed, is that she was the mother of Elizabeth I. Had she not also been the mother of Elizabeth I, it would be a different story.
Exactly, and precisely that. Thank you for taking away my last talking point, Rebecca. That was great.
Sorry. Did I jump ahead?
One time I prepare for a show, and Rebecca goes and rips it apart. No, it's only a joke. But yes, you're right. That happens to Juana too, because her son is Emperor Charles V, who we've talked so many times about.
Born in the toilet?
Yeah, born in the toilet. Who also, talking about parallel lives, we do have to do the guys once in a while. Charles V and Henry VIII are very good, because we all know Francis I and Henry VIII were basically the same person. One had the French accent and the other one had an English accent. But in the case of Charles V, who is the son who co-rules with Juana and succeeds her, well, technically, because they die about the same time, is very different than Henry VIII. So I think it would be fun to do a parallel lives, the Emperor versus the King of England too. But yes, in that sense, I think Juana and Anne are very famous because they have very famous children.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that continues your legacy, doesn't it?
And it's the second half of the 16th century in England. We have figures like Shakespeare, and there's a golden era with Elizabeth. So, and Elizabeth, in that exhibition I'll be curating, this is not a plug for my exhibition or anything, coming up next month. Better visit it. There is, it's focused on medals and portrait medals, but in these portrait medals, in the reverses, and there's a lot of symbology. Elizabeth I uses the phoenix that is linked to her mother in her medals. So I mean, she lives on through that legacy of Elizabeth I, of course, Anne Boleyn, and so does Juana, because she appears in the documents, even though she's imprisoned and she doesn't technically rule. She is mentioned in all the documents. She's in the coins. She's a presence, right?
Yeah.
She's a presence, and because she is what we call in Spanish reina propietaria, which is queen regnant in England. It's a bit different because in Spanish the literal translation would be the monarch who owns the crown, right? In Spanish, propietarias means ownership. But it's basically the same. It's the person who holds the right to rule. And Charles V only holds the right to rule Spain as Charles I of Spain because of his mother, and rules with her, technically, even though she's imprisoned. So in that sense, they have very famous children. And that was my last talking point. Let's start with the first one, Rebecca. How about that?
Okay, before we get to that, though, I want to go back because I want to talk about the Phoenix thing. 'Cause I know off camera, we had talked a little bit about how in a previous episode with Sylvia Barber Soberton, she also had mentioned some of the research that she had done on Elizabeth, where Elizabeth uses the Phoenix.
Precisely, it was in Sylvia's research that I found about this, and she ties it to a poem written where the phoenix is compared to Anne Boleyn. And let's remind listeners what the phoenix is known for. It's a mythical creature. It's not like a real bird or anything, but tied to in the time of Elizabeth. Sometimes they say from the Phoenicians and from the Arabs, and let's remember the Phoenicians were in Spain too. So it's definitely an exotic bird. It's mentioned in the sources from antiquity, and it's known to be a bird that it's reborn from its own ashes.
Yeah.
So comparing, Anne Boleyn to the phoenix is the way that starting in the 1570s, when Elizabeth knows that she's not going to have children, probably, well, she's assuming that, she's presenting herself as an eternal youth with things like a portraiture, but also with this phoenix. So through her mother and her mother's symbol, she's presenting herself as an eternal monarch. That's what she's claiming to be. And it's a good strategy because if you're not going to have children, you'll have to be able to convince everyone you're going to be eternal.
Yeah, that's so true. And here in my strange mind that I have, I'm going to totally nerd out. And I'm such a dork. So I used to watch Charmed a lot. And if you guys aren't familiar with Charmed, it's this TV series from back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Shannon Doherty, Alyssa Milano, and Holly Marie Combs. Okay, they play these three sisters, right? They're witches and they're hunting demons or whatever. The point that I'm getting to is one of the demons that they would hunt was the Lazarus demon, who would also rise from its own ashes. I find that really interesting that both the Phoenix and this Lazarus, I can't even say it, demon. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. Do you know anything about that?
I wasn't that much into Charm, to be honest with you. I remember the show, but I don't know about this demon. I do know there's a lot of that. For example, in ancient Egyptian culture, there's also that rebirth of, especially with every year with the Nile, and so there's a lot of things in ancient Egypt tied to this phoenix. So the phoenix is also in their hieroglyphics and things like that. And also it's one of these exotic animals that the ancient Greeks and Romans are talking about in world exploration. So also the fact that, Elizabeth does have a relationship with the Turks and I think it's also her way of showing her international connections and her humanist education too, because these symbols are brought from antiquity. That means that they are recovering the classics, the classical texts, because technically, to say this mythical creature is around is a bit heretical, but
Yeah.
So it's them just adhering to that humanist culture, and for sure Elizabeth is very cultivated because of the way Catherine of Aragon changes the court and educates the women in the court, like in the case of Anne Boleyn.
Yes. Okay, I'll get back to the topic now. But if you're listening and you know
no
what
more Charm, please don't bring it up again.
I always have to bring up TV shows, don't I? I know
Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Okay,
there's going to be somebody who comments and says, "Oh my gosh, I love Charm too," and then we're going to be fast friends. So I'm just
you're right. Yeah, and then other people who are going to be like, "Dr. Emma's right. That was a terrible show."
Oh gosh. Okay, so back to the topic at hand. Let's talk about Anne Boleyn. When she came to the court and Henry fell fast for her, one of the things that we read about a lot is her appearance and how she wasn't the classic beauty of the time. Yes. Did she have some similarities to Juana in this respect as well?
Yes. So the other day, when in the first episode of Parallel Lives, when we were talking about Isabel of Castile and Catherine Aragon, we mentioned a source that mentions Juana, Catherine, and they say how different they looked. And he specifically mentions in gesture and also in manner and in appearance, right? So that's two things. That means that they were physically different and then that they have different characters. So talking about the first topic, which is what you brought up, the beauty standards and all that. Yes, Anne Boleyn is described as having dark eyes and being kind of a different beauty, right? Not to the standards of the time, which were basically what Rebecca looks like. It's just blonde women with blue eyes, very pale skin. We've seen them all in all these paintings, right? And Catherine Aragon looked like this. And Isabel of Castile looked like this. And Mary Rose Tudor looked like this. But on the other hand, Anne Boleyn didn't look like this. And Juana didn't look like this either. And we do have portraits of Juana. And we see that she has brown eyes and brown hair. But at the same time, even though they weren't the typical beauties or what it was expected to be the most beautiful women, their husbands were very attracted to them. Henry VIII was very attractive. I mean, look at what he did just for her. And when Philip of Habsburg, dubbed the handsome Philip the Fair,
I love the eye roll.
the eye roll to the back of my skull. Triple eye roll to the back of
Philip
skull.
the Coward. That's what we should call him from now on.
Yes, a crybaby. He also, I mean, we always have to take these sources with a pinch of salt because what it says is that when he finally, after like she arrived and he was like, well, I'm somewhere else. I'll see you sometime. When they finally met in person, he wanted to consummate the marriage right away. And so they did. They got married and consummated. They were very young too. So, and they've been waiting for some time to get married. So, I mean, but definitely they were rare beauties, different beauties, both of them. And also, the second part of what the ambassador mentions is that Juana was very different to Catherine in character. We mentioned that Catherine Aragon was a golden child, behaved like her mother, always had a smile on her face. Could be, resolute when had to, but preferred non-confrontation and would never like make a scene, right? Occasionally, rarely. Well, Juana and Boleyn, don't let me know that. There's so many instances where these women have direct confrontations with important people. With Anne Boleyn with fun guy, but also with Henry.
Yeah.
Juana with her mother. And she knows how to make a scene, a big one. Juana is very good at. She had a theatrical vein to her for sure. She knew how to make a scene.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's just a Spanish quality.
Okay. Maybe some Spanish people, a lot of Spanish people, probably. Yes.
I'm sorry. I couldn't resist.
You're right. I think that's a fair statement. And sometimes stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. I could say not every Spanish person is like that, but definitely a large majority. No, a lot of people, including me.
Just like every Minnesotan isn't always the Minnesota nice.
No, passive aggressiveness is part of Minnesota nice too. Yes, not everybody, not all the time, but when you feel it, it's like a dart to the heart.
It is.
But I would say that, for example, Minnesota is non-confrontational. They don't like a confrontation. Whereas I think one of the things that maybe we've inherited from that time, Spanish people, I don't know, but Juana of Castile had this character, direct people, and. If you have an issue, you just you bring it up.
Yeah.
And want an answer right away. Why?
I love this comparison of Anne Boleyn and Juana because I think there are so many similarities in their lives. And until you sent me some of the bullet points on these similarities, I didn't see them. And I think some of them are so obvious too.
But it's very attached to those qualities that, you know, the beauty is being good, which is a very Renaissance term. So, like the ginger, blue-eyed little angels, they're all good. Yeah, Rebecca, right. And then, you know, the people with the darker hair. No, but it's true. It just seems to fit the narrative too well. And we talked about how, in the case of Juana, it could just be a matter of her character just being different, not being laid back and or calculated, if you want to say. But instead of laid back, I think I said laid back last time, but I think it means more. I meant more calculated, because and I can relate to Juana and Anne Boleyn. Like I said, you know, if something is said in front of me and it's not true or it's unfair or whatever, I will speak up. And in the even if you were a queen in the 60s, if you chose the wrong time, if you would ridicule your husband in front of people, and let's remember Juana was the queen and Philip of the handsome
The coward.
was the coward was king because he was married to her.
Yeah.
He knew that. And just these women had been empowered to speak their minds, you know. Imagine Juana just like, and Philip, you know, he had his affairs and things, and Juana would not tolerate that, like other women would just turn a blind eye. Not that Catherine did. The first time that Henry did it, Catherine also like made a scene, but I think she just chose the path that her mother Isabel chose with Fernando. And I think Juana was very much probably like her father or like Henry VIII. But in a woman, like we said last episode, it's not taken the same way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Philip and Juana had an abusive relationship, and he started saying that she was crazy. Oh, surprise, surprise. The handsome man says the lady's crazy.
Yeah. The intelligent lady, of course, is crazy.
The smart lady that speaks her mind and is going to be Queen of Castile.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing about women in the 16th century, and not singularly the 16th century, but women in history, I guess, is how they were just a chess piece, and they were used by the men in their family to advance that family one way or another. And this is also something that Anne Boleyn and Juana have in common.
Yes, and I want to mention in that sense when they always say, well, Thomas Boleyn sent Anne to Margaret of Austria and then Queen Claudia. Yeah, Thomas Boleyn was a diplomat working for Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. So when his daughters are sent with Mary Rose Tudor to the court of Margaret of Austria to France first with Henry Cavill. I mean with Charles Brandon.
There it is.
That's on the orders of the king and queen, and the queen is the Spanish ambassadress dealing with also the imperial affairs. So she's the one who sends Mary and Anne to Margaret of Austria or to Queen Claude. It's with Catherine of Aragon that Queen Claude corresponds. It's Queen Claude who sends portraits of the Dauphin to Catherine of Aragon. And I'm sure who told her all about the things that Anne and Mary, Anne Boleyn's sister, were learning there. Because another thing that Juana and Anne have in common is that they're not their first children, right? Mm-hmm. We know that Mary was older than Anne. And because we don't know...
Well, we think so, right? It's always questionable.
She was because she's always in the service first. It's more with her brother, right? George, we're not sure because he's born in 1504, but since we don't know the exact date of the birth of Anne Boleyn, and in that sense, I want to say, all these people looking for the date of birth of Anne Boleyn left and right, and then there's so many sources in Spain that have not been used that mention Anne Boleyn. I'm sure they could have dates of birth and things like that. But you have to learn Spanish to check these sources.
Well, we know that will not happen for me.
Well, I don't think it happens for a lot of Tudor historians, and that's such a shame. But there's also collaborative work. There's a lot of graduate students in Spain that would love to work with historians. So I encourage Tudor historians to think outside the box when they're trying to solve these dilemmas, like when was Anne Boleyn born? Because I know there's many sources in Simancas, there's many sources in the Biblioteca Nacional in Madrid, and in several archives that mention Anne Boleyn, chronicles, this, that, the other, from the time.
Yeah.
So
I think it's so important. We talk about this all the time on the show, how important it is to look at all of the sources from the time, not just to stick in one country, because it's imperative to know what these other countries were thinking or saying or
exactly.
gossiping
And not
about.
just France and Italy and
Yeah.
the Netherlands, you know? Spain too. Come on. It's
Yeah.
easy. It's not that difficult. There's a lot of people in Spain willing to collaborate. So they're so underused, these archives in Spain for all these Tudor big dilemmas that maybe could be solved this way.
Yeah, most definitely.
I wouldn't be surprised if it mentions it because
It
there's
could.
several chronicles of Henry VIII written in Spanish.
Yes, those Chronicles of Henry VIII, by the way. I have read them for my Thomas Seymour research, and some of it is a little questionable.
So the first thing to know is you're reading off a translation that David Hume made of one of those manuscripts.
Okay.
So that's
Yeah.
all I'll say.
It's in.
That's how much the Tudor historians have delved into those the Chronicle of Henry VIII written in Spanish. They've read off a translation someone made in the 19th century into English.
Right.
Wow, that's a great achievement.
Well, we also recently talked about the British history online as well, and how most of that was translated during the Victorian era as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I use it. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying you shouldn't use the Hume's translation, but if you're that invested in knowing Anne Boleyn's date of birth, you need to delve deeper. That's what I'm saying. I use the Calendar State Papers. I use the letters and
Mhm.
papers of Henry VIII. I use all of these sources because I don't have time to go through every single document. I am not in London, and it's difficult. But if there's a document that I find that is, I go to the original source. That's a must.
That's
And
the
in
deal.
this case, if you are studying something like the marriage of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, that's when that Spanish Chronicle starts.
Yeah.
And
Here
there's
we are.
several manuscripts, not just one.
We always get off topic a little bit, don't we?
But it mentions Anne Boleyn.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and at this point, when Anne Boleyn, let's think about this. When Anne Boleyn is being crowned in London on the 1st of June, 1533, Juana is still imprisoned.
Oh my
So
gosh.
she outlives Anne Boleyn, even though well, we don't know because we don't know when Anne Boleyn was born. But let's say, what do you believe is do you think it's 1501?
I honestly have no opinion on it whatsoever. I guess if anything, it would make more sense for it to be 1507 age-wise, as far as Henry VIII and wanting a child. But honestly, I haven't looked into it enough, and I really don't care
Well,
enough.
but you could argue that, let's mention another one of his wives that was beheaded, Catherine Howard, was just a teenager,
Yeah.
a little girl, really. So, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know when she was born. But let's say Juana was born in 1479. So she was, more than 20 years her senior. Yet Anne Boleyn is executed in 1536, and Juana doesn't die until 1555.
That's pretty
She's
amazing.
imprisoned from 1509 to 1555. So
That
she knows
is,
about Anne Boleyn and everything that's happening. And in fact, when she is imprisoned in Tordesillas in 1509, there's an inventory of her goods. And she takes to Tordesillas at least 4 pictures of the Princess of Wales. So of her sister, Catherine of Aragon. And she
interesting.
takes another piece it's like an altar piece that has the coat of arms of England as well as the coat of arms of Burgundy. And those pieces and those portraits were given to her when she visited the Tudor court in 1506. So Anne Boleyn was only a child or wasn't even born. But
Right.
Juana was in England at least twice. And then they kind of cross paths a little bit because then Anne Boleyn goes to Margaret of Austria. Juana lived in Flanders for many years. So they were kind of like crossing each other's paths at some points. But at the time that Anne Boleyn becomes prominent, Juana's just been imprisoned for years now. But she has news of the things going on in the world. She's visited by people. So I'm sure she knew what happened to her sister, Catherine Aragon, and I'm sure she knew she died like this, and must have been horrible after years of being imprisoned, learning that your baby sister was probably poisoned by her ex-husband and new wife.
I can't even imagine how she survived that long. I don't know that I would have made it that long, being imprisoned and just kept from so much.
At first, she had her, so she was pregnant when she was in prison, and she gave birth to her baby girl, her youngest, Catalina, so named her after Catherine of Aragon. And she raised her in prison. So Catalina was with her. And I think that kept her going until, if you have a baby and you have to take care of it and this and that. But then Charles wants to take her away because he wants to marry Catalina. He wants her to become Queen of Portugal. And Juana throws one of her fits, like a
Mm,
big one. A big one to the point that they're like, give her back for a little bit because we don't know what's going to happen.
yeah.
So I think Juana probably was better. I'm not going to say was better in prison, but at least they weren't, at least it wasn't, I don't know, she was mistreated too. So, which
Well,
is very sad.
it almost seems like Juana had a little bit more control, maybe. I don't even know if that's the right word. When we talk about the men using these women as chess pieces, Anne Boleyn's dad, let's say,
Yeah,
using
yeah.
her, and Juana's got her own father and her husband. And
You can't execute the ruling queen.
yeah,
Exactly. You can't, yeah. And that, I mean, for Fernando would have been going against his own nature. That's his daughter. You can't execute your own daughter. You got a wife? Yeah.
that's another story.
I mean,
Yeah.
she's a witch, so
Right. Yeah.
that's what Henry accused her of. Incest, adultery, witchcraft. What else were the charges?
Incest. That was in there too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I said I meant. I think that was the first one I said.
I just wanted to make sure we emphasize incest.
Okay, let's say it again. You want to say it together at the same
Okay, I'm
time?
sorry. I was barely listening. Gosh.
Well, and let's say why. Because allegedly she slept with her own brother, right?
Yes.
It just seems too convenient. All these allegations were all just too, yeah. It's,
I think we
but
can all
those were
agree.
the ones that she was trialed for. Imagine the level of betrayal that Anne Boleyn felt, or Juana felt when she was in prison, told that she was crazy.
Yeah.
Loca, loca. That's what they called her. It's a very famous movie. There's a scene. So when they know she's going to become queen of Castile because her older siblings have died. So she has to come with Philip to Spain, and that's when she has a big confrontation with her mom, Isabel, and Isabel imprisons her first.
Mm,
And Juana throws a very big fit. So what she does is she goes outside when it's in the night, in the middle of the night, without her proper clothes, and starts like making a scene, right? Because she wants to go. Her husband is left. Philip is left to go back to Flanders, and she's pregnant. And they told her, "Don't leave because you need to have this child. You can't just go." And she leaves as soon as the baby's born. The
mm,
baby is born. Fernando is born in the same place that Catherine Aragon was born, in Alcalá de Henares. And shortly after that baby is born, she leaves the baby with her mom and dad and goes to Philip in Flanders. So she just has this very toxic relationship with Philip, but at the same time I think she mixes up the love factor with the duty factor, something that Catherine Aragon I don't think ever did. And I think Anne Boleyn a little bit the same. I think she thought she knew Henry was in love with her, but you still had to behave like a queen. You can't be threatening people left and right because you're not a ruling queen. You're a queen consort. So when she has a fight with Fun Guy, Henry sides with Fun Guy,
yeah.
even though they're not even married yet.
Yeah, I think
I
really
think it's the women, these women not understanding that you can be powerful as a woman,
Mhm.
but through other means. And it's not throwing fits, and it's
Right.
not making scenes, and it's not threatening people and raising your voice to very important people in front of
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That is the biggest difference, I think. And when we talk about Anne Boleyn and her demise, really, she wasn't guilty of any of the charges that were brought
no.
against her, except for imagining the king's death. That was like the one thing that could be pinned on her.
Well, yes, yes. I mean, adultery, why not? Henry was already in his, you know, he wasn't the most attractive man in the world.
What? What?
So, incest, I don't think so, but adultery,
Hmm.
I don't rule it out.
Well, the pressure that she must have felt to give
I
the
mean,
king a son. I don't know if she cheated on her husband or not, but she
but the
definitely.
track record tells us that the Boleyn sisters had fame in France first, and then we know about Mary and Henry. I
Yeah.
don't know. I think as soon as Catherine of Aragon wasn't in charge of the court, it was a bit I don't know.
A free for all.
Kinda. I mean, it did happen a lot. It's normal at the time. Catherine Howard is accused of adultery too,
Hmm.
isn't she?
Yeah, she is.
It's Henry just realizing that he's not the hottest guy anymore. So that
Well,
part of the show will have to be played by another actor, not Henry Cavill.
that could be Jude Law from Firebrand.
Oh, Jude Law, yes.
He was the perfect old,
Oh, but
fat,
again, he's not. Is
ugly.
he tall?
Well, he was tall enough. I mean,
He's shrinking in his old age. He's just shrinking, Henry.
I do love young Jude Law, but as the aging, overweight Henry VIII, I think he did a really good job playing that character, and he kind of looked the part too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think he did a good job. I'm just, I don't know if that transition would work for me. Probably. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Hey, sorry to interrupt the show, but if you're enjoying this chat with Dr. Emma, you'll love what else we have on Tudor's Dynasty and beyond. From the Anglo-Saxons to the Stuarts and beyond, we uncover the real people behind the history, their triumphs, tragedies, and everything in between. With expert guests, fresh perspectives, and stories you won't find in most history books, there's always something new to discover. Hit follow on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. All right, back to the show. Okay, so what other similarities did these two women have that we haven't talked
Oh,
about?
well, yeah. I think it comes down to the passion because they're both known for their being good dancers, very good with music. So, for example, there's a very curious manuscript of music for Anne Boleyn in the College of Music in London, where in the music there are illuminations, and there is in one of them her falcon is pecking a pomegranate.
Oh, ooh, that's like fighting words in imagery.
And let's remind listeners that the pomegranate was a symbol of Catherine of Aragon in England, not used by anyone until her. Yes, used by her daughter, who brings it back. So Elizabeth and Mary, that would be, and I'm sure we'll do Mary the First and Elizabeth the First parallel lives, but
Yeah.
the symbols of their mothers become, see again, the phoenix, the
Yeah.
pomegranate, this and that. And they're using these symbols because they're proud of their moms, as they should be. I think it's because a little bit of justice for them in relation to the relationship to Henry and how unfair. And in that sense, Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn are very similar. They were both very unjustly treated by Henry VIII. And their daughters, each in their own respect, know that and use that as a way to when they become queens to show that they are proud of their maternal lineage too. And that's cool. I think that's really cool of both of them.
Yeah, I love that. So
Yeah,
Anne Boleyn and Juana were both dancers. They were into music. Was
very good dancers, very good with music. Juana especially was very good with a clavichord. Known for her dancing, known for being very, very smart and intelligent. But again, with that, a little bit more of that fiery passion, if you're into more dancing and music and that, again, a stereotype, but not necessarily a wrong stereotype when you are more passionate about things
Mhm.
and you just can't contain yourself. And in that sense, I think, when do we know for sure that Anne Boleyn caught Henry's eye was when she was performing in, well, I think, but probably, saw each other earlier, probably in Calais or somewhere a few years prior, but for sure is when she's performing. I mean, she's dressed in a beautiful gown. So those music, dancing, it was all part of the performance of court. And I think because they were red beauties, they would stand out in a
Yeah.
crowd of women with blonde hair. Who is that woman that moves a bit, quicker with the dark hair? And another stereotype about Spanish women, they all know how to dance and have very good moves, which is totally true, by the way. There's a stereotype that you can just assume it's true. Every woman in Spain knows how to dance perfectly, amazingly.
Well, they always talk about Anne Boleyn's eyes too.
Yeah.
Like I think she knew how to flirt with her eyes. Is that a Spanish trait as well?
I don't know. How would I know that? Covering my eyes right now. No, but we do know that Henry VIII met Juana when she was married to Philip, 1506. She's already had a bunch of babies. So, I mean, she's young still, but I mean, babies and pregnancies,
Yeah.
who's been through a pregnancy knows. And when Philip dies, very shortly after, for drinking some poison that Fernando gave him, most likely, Henry the Seventh is like, "Oh, Juana's available." Oh, and Catherine tries to bring Juana to England to marry Henry. In the inventories of Henry VIII, there is a picture of Juana and Philip that and of their children.
Oh.
So when they came in 1506, they left pictures. I'm sure Henry VII was like, "I like this one with this dark hair, this half smile." When she came, I don't think she was crazy. So Catherine tried it, but Fernando was like, "No way. I'm going to leave the ruling queen, allegedly, leave Spain so the King of England can marry her and claim the throne of Castile.
Yeah.
She's better off imprisoned." So that never came to fruition, but Catherine tried very hard I think it was a way for her to bring her probably to England to be with her and take care of her. She probably thought, if she's here with me, we can figure it out what's going through her mind or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and as a father, it makes more sense to keep your daughters in different countries as well because the whole thing is alliances, right?
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Yes. And I think Fernando was after that very toxic relationship between Philip and Juana, he probably thought, well, she might get into a toxic relationship again, because those
Yeah.
things do tend to repeat themselves. And Henry VII wasn't the nicest guy, apparently, and he was an aging monarch, and so, yeah, but it would have been very complicated because Juana already had Charles V, and it was not Charles V at the time, but you know what I mean. It was complex. It gets complex when people have baggage and 6 children. And that's a parallel with today's world, right?
It is. It really is.
And on the other hand, with Anne Boleyn, I think the thing is that the passion was just different because as soon as she manifests this passion and is like no and speaks up in that, she doesn't have the backup that Juana has. Well, the backup to go imprisoned, but so she is disposable for Henry.
Yeah.
Sorry to say, and that's very sad. And I feel for her, and I feel for her little daughter who grew up without a mom, and that no wonder Elizabeth the First had tough skin because she had to.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing about the parallel lives between these two women is the legacy that they each left behind. Because,
Mhm.
like you said, Anne Boleyn had Elizabeth the First. What a great legacy to leave behind. Gloriana, right? And then we have Juana, who had multiple children, but of course, the one that comes to mind first is always Charles V.
Well, all her children were her other son was an emperor. That Fernando that I told you that was born in Spain, and he succeeded Charles V as Holy Roman Emperor. So Juana's children were queens and emperors. That's her legacy. And in that sense, because she had so many children, two were boys, she was a successful queen in her own time because of that. So she's the matriarch of that, big relationship that the Habsburgs, the two sides of the Habsburgs, the ones in Vienna from then on, and the ones in Madrid, the dynasty that substitutes the Trastamaras or Trastamaras, as some people like to say.
I feel like you're making fun of me.
Sure. It's got an accent in Spanish. When we have an accent, it means the stress is in that syllable.
Trastamara.
Muy bien, Rebeca. Ahora este es un podcast en español.
Sehr gut.
I just said, no, this is a podcast in Spanish. One day, people. Un día, un día.
You can speak in Spanish. I'll reply in the little German. I still remember.
That is the last time she ever came to the podcast.
Well, this has been a lot of fun comparing these two women. Have we missed anything?
What do you think was your biggest surprise? Because I think I've covered all my talking points, but has anything really surprised you?
I don't know that anything really surprised me. I guess maybe their appearance. I think I always imagined Juana as being beautiful.
Well, that's the thing. I think they were both beautiful. I mean, because I've been researching Anne Boleyn a lot. You guys know that now.
Mhm.
And my exhibition coming up next month. There is a sketch by Holbein in the British Museum, very similar to that, the Most Happy Medal. That is the only image that we do know. And I put this in social media before, where Holbein could have included the word Anna on the bodice of the sketch I'm talking about. Right?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful woman to me. The same way when I see Juana's portraits, I see a beautiful woman. It's just the standard of the time was very constrained. It was exactly like it was in the early 2000s, where you had to be super skinny. You remember? It's
I
just
do.
the standard
Yeah.
was very, very narrow, right? I look at these sketches I think it's Anne Boleyn and the portraits of Juana, and they're beautiful women.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. I think that's probably maybe what surprised me. Well, I didn't
When
sound
I
very
see the
confident there.
yeah, when I see the picture of Henry VIII in the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum, the best picture of Henry VIII by Holbein, he's not that handsome, to be honest. When I see the pictures of Philip the Handsome, Philip Habsburg, he looks like he's about to drop his jaw to the floor. Don't get me started on Charles V, because yikes. I think the women looked pretty good, to be honest. That's 500 years ago. Sometimes you see some things that are a bit shocking because some women, would pluck the hair from the forehead to look like they had so there was different standards of
Yeah.
beauty. But the other day, preparing for this and other things, I found out in that, do you remember we talked about that beautiful picture of portrait of Catherine of Aragon as Princess of Wales in the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum, where she's holding the bud of a red rose?
Yes.
I was looking because we used that for our image for the episode, right? Episode 1. I was looking at that closely, and her eyebrows are plucked, they're brushed. We think we're so modern now because we do all these things to our eyebrows. It's pretty in fashion nowadays. And they were doing it 500 years ago. So I think the women look pretty good, to be honest.
Well, I
I
think
think
so
Anne
too.
and Juana were beautiful.
Yeah, it's all about the male standard of beauty. That's really what we're looking at when it comes to these women in history. What did the men think of them?
Well, the men, and like I said, that was a talking point. The Henry VIII and Philip were very attracted to them, to Anne and to
Hmm.
Juana. So they thought they were very beautiful too. It's just it didn't fit that standard that was at the
Yeah.
time the other type of woman, but even better because they were exotic looking, right?
Yeah.
That's probably what the men like Henry VIII thought. That's probably what Henry VII thought when he saw Juana. And then she was speaking with an accent and this and that. You always like what's different too.
Of course. Well, we've talked before about how the men even writing about Henry VIII's appearance at the time had so many flattering things to say about him. I mean, it was such a man's world. The men dictated everything.
The men were obsessed, the kings of England especially, and the Spanish monarchs were a bit surprised, especially Isabel and Fernando, that why was Henry VII so interested in knowing all these brides that he was trying to find, what they looked like. Because Isabel was like, they are princesses, infantas. What do you mean what they look like? How dare you? You're lucky just for us to consider you as a, candidate.
Yeah.
But he sends a full report saying, well, look at if her breath smells, if she has a mustache. Can you look at her breasts, please? This full report on this woman's appearance, this other infanta that he's thinking of marrying. And for example, and the guy fills out the report and and it says, when it says, did she have a mustache? He's like, as far as I could see, no. How were her breasts? Well, she had very big clothes, so I can't really tell her figure. He's like, did her breath smell? Well, I couldn't come close to her, so.
I don't know.
Yeah, and then the last thing that he says is find a cunning portrait painter to paint a picture of her as close to reality as possible. And if he doesn't achieve it, get him to do it again or get him to do another one. So Henry VII and Henry VIII were the same guy practically, because what does Henry VIII do with Holbein? He sends him to paint Anna of Cleves, to paint Anna of Christina of Denmark. And he wants to know. And then he trusts the picture. And then when he sees the woman, he doesn't like Anna of Cleves, but he did like Anne Boleyn. So see, the men did have their preferences too, and then we're not always aligned with the standard of beauty of the time, just like now, That's great.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Toxic, both of them.
Yeah.
I think that would be my biggest takeaway. Toxic relationships end up badly.
Well,
and
always.
Juana had hers with Philip, and Henry VIII had his with Anne Boleyn.
Yeah. Dr. Emma, this has been another fun episode of our Parallel Lives series. Today we talked about Anne Boleyn and Juana of Castile. And I love learning about these women. And the more we talk about Margaret of Austria, I just really want to learn more about her because she just seems so fascinating to me.
I know a lot about Margaret of Austria.
Oh, maybe we'll have to find a Parallel Lives for her.
Well, she taught French to Catherine of Aragon. For all they say that Catherine of Aragon was a prude, she could whisper things to Henry in several languages, and French was one of them. So she wasn't a prude. And Margaret of Austria taught her that in Spain. So it wasn't all just, praying and that in the court of Isabel of Castile. Margaret of Austria was there. When we talk about her, I will bring up all the mentions to the amount of jewelry she gets from Isabel of Castile is just insane.
Ooh, I love it. What a good teaser. I feel like now we're going to have to
bling,
work on
bling alert.
Well, Dr. Emma, thank you so much for coming back today for another episode of Dr. Emma and Me. I look forward to seeing you again next Thursday.
Yay! Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of Dr. Emma and Me. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate and review the show. It really helps more people find it. Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you'll know as soon as a new episode drops. And if you'd like to support what we're doing, head over to Patreon and become a patron. You'll get early access, bonus content, and more. Thanks again for being here. See you next time.